When the USSR collapsed, Sergei Krikalev was floating inside the Mir space station some 350 kilometers above his home country. Initially, his mission was planned to last for 5 months. He eventually spent twice that time in orbit.
At the time, they had to reduce Soyuz launches drastically, and they also absolutely had to keep someone on board the Mir station for maintenance, so they eventually asked Krikalev to stay on.
In Russia, Krikalev is presented as a true Soviet hero who saved Mir. In the West, he is pictured abandoned in space by a crumbling superpower.
Ouf, c'est ce qu'a dû se dire ce matin Sergei Krikalev, le cosmonaute soviétique qui rongeait son frein dans l'espace depuis près d'1 an. La relève est enfin sur orbite, Krikalev est parti soviétique, il rentre russe.
It became big because it was a good story. A poor cosmonaut stuck up there, lost in space. But I happen to know Krikalev very well, and I can tell you he is very resilient. And he fully accepted this mission. It was not a problem.
When Sergei Krikalev returns to Earth on the 25th of March 1992, his country has essentially ceased to exist. His Soviet passport is worthless. He touches down in a Soyuz module just like this one in Kazakhstan, a now independent country. His home city has switched names back to St. Petersburg after being known as Leningrad for decades. And his comfortable monthly 600 ruble salary is now worth next to nothing. When it inherited the Soviet space program, Russia was broke.
They had a money problem. All of a sudden, the budget was gone. When Boris Yeltsin took power, any money spent on Russia's image and status in the world was considered wasted. And the space program was one of the main Soviet propaganda instruments, so it was clearly in the crosshairs. The situation was dire.
Soviet know-how was at risk, and Western powers decided to step in with a massive project, the International Space Station. The space race was over. It was time to cooperate.
The Americans invited the Russians to take part in the program. They came with all their space station expertise. They were the ones who started investing massively in space stations as soon as the early 70s.
At the beginning, it was difficult to work together, especially around 1995-96. After that, things eased up significantly with the first ISS missions.
On the 31st of October 2000, the first astronauts entered the ISS. Russian Soyuz and US shuttles started ferrying astronauts to and from the orbital station for 11 years until the shuttle program was abandoned, considered too expensive and too dangerous. From 2011, the Russians find themselves with a de facto monopoly on human spaceflight to the ISS. Seats cost up to 70 million euros. There are 4 capsules a year with 3 astronauts on board, enough to keep the program afloat. Until 2020, when a new competitor enters the arena, SpaceX with Crew Dragon.
Ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 to the space station on the first commercial launch from Kennedy Space Center's historic Pad 39A.
The Americans wanted direct access to space and the ISS. Until then, the US depended on Russia to access the ISS.
This is Houston. Bob and Doug, welcome to the International Space Station.
Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, is now faced with new competition from the US private sector and actors such as China or India. At 2 billion euros, its budget is 1/10 of NASA's, not enough to start a new big project or even to take a significant part in the US-led push to build the Lunar Gateway, a space station orbiting the moon.
The Russian space agency sees itself as rejected and marginalized by the West. That fuels a nationalist feeling and a desire to develop ties with China. This is also happening in other sectors where China and Russia join forces.
What happens in space is deeply intertwined with geopolitics. It's very complex and important. The Russians are keeping all possibilities open. They can choose to cooperate with the Chinese, with the Americans, or with both.
For now, Russia has to scale back scientific and civilian operations, but it remains focused on its military program. On the 15th of November, it destroyed an old Soviet-era satellite with a missile fired from Earth. This isn't a first, but it still sends out a strong message.
It was clearly a show of force, a technological feat that demonstrated that Russia is to be taken seriously. It's also a way of appearing center stage at a time when everyone has eyes on China. Obviously, it doesn't make Russia look good, but it does show the world they're good at what they do.
Today, most smart weapons depend on satellites to operate. If a war breaks out, the Earth's orbit will become a major battleground. The Russians know this and are eager to show they're ready.